Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you joined us today for our winter webinar series hosted by University of Illinois Extension's Local Food Systems and Small Farm team. I'm Catherine Pereira, a local food system and small farm educator based here in Cook County, and I'm today's webinar moderator. So we're so glad you've joined us here for your lunch hour, and please note that this presentation is being recorded. It's difficult to deliver in-depth, actionable information in 1 hour. So please put your questions in the chat box during the presentation, and we'll do our best to make sure that all your questions are answered at the end. The chat box can also be used for any other questions you have related to the webinar, especially technical questions such as sound issues or other problems that we might be able to help you with. After today's presentation, you'll receive an email which will include a link to a recording and a link to a very short evaluation. We really want to hear what you think about our webinar, so please take a minute or two to fill it out. And if you'd like to fill out the evaluation survey immediately after the webinar, look for a live link in the chat box at the end of the session. So before we begin today, again, please fill out that demographic poll here in Zoom. If it hasn't automatically popped up for you, click on polls in your webinar toolbar. This is a voluntary and anonymous demographic form that helps Extension continue to provide programs like this for you. So now that these logistics are out of the way, I'm very pleased, and especially personally pleased as a former organic vegetable farmer who learned the lesson not to quit her day job the hard way, to welcome Andy Larson from the Food Finance Institute at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Andy joined the Food Finance Institute as a farm outreach specialist in January 2021 and works with entrepreneurial farm businesses to build farm financial management capacity and access the capital they need to grow. Andy has expertise in farm business and marketing, agricultural lending, and grantmanship. Prior to joining the Food Finance Institute, Andy worked as an agriculture and commercial loan officer at a community bank, providing commercial credit to family farms and small businesses in northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin. His portfolio included crop farms, dairy farms, and a wide variety of local food farms. Before that, Andy worked for University Extension in both Iowa and here with us in Illinois, providing programming on the business and marketing side of small farms, local foods, and sustainable agriculture. Andy earned an undergraduate degree from the University of Notre Dame, a master's degree in natural resources and environmental sciences from the University of Illinois, and a Master of Business Administration from Iowa State University. Andy grew up on a dairy farm and now lives with his wife and 3 daughters on a small-scale poultry farm just down the road where they produce free-range brown eggs for local restaurants, retail stores, and farmers markets. So welcome, Andy. Take it away.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Catherine. No matter how short I make those bios, they're never short enough. Andy's the dork from a dairy farm in far northern Illinois, and now he tries to help other local food and niche market farmers get money to grow their business. That's the bullet of it. Yeah, you may have heard Catherine say that I just joined FFI, the Food Finance Institute, in January. So I am officially on month number 2 in this role, and still definitely in the honeymoon phase. Things are going great, and I'm really enjoying working for FFI. You can see that my title is called Farm Outreach Specialist. I'm really a farm financial consultant, and the idea is to help farmers get their sort of financial house in order to pursue new loans, new grants, new cost share, new equity investors, in order to get some money to grow their business. That's really how we get measured. The Food Finance Institute is it's a sister shop to the Wisconsin SBDC, the Small Business Development Center. They're the kind of elephant in the room as far as our overall group. The group is within the umbrella of UW's Institute for Business and Entrepreneurship. So we're all folks with some professional experiences looking to help entrepreneurs grow their businesses in Wisconsin and beyond. So the folks that we have here in my shop, just so you guys know who we are, Tara Johnson's the boss lady. She's on the speaking circuit a lot. If you're into food and food businesses and seeing how they grow and how they're financed, you may have seen Tara before. Brad down in the lower right, he does a lot of the food and beverage, consumer packaged goods kind of training and really helps those businesses grow and expand quickly once they've got a few years under their belt and they're trying to enter the sort of growth phase. Sarah and Shelby and Penny all have food business experience as well. Sarah's the grease in the wheels that makes our shop keep going. Shelby makes sure that the outreach and educational opportunities go off, and Penny helps us find money to keep doing the work that we're doing. The concept, the question of how and if I should start a farm it's a pretty big one. It's a large conceptual question that involves sort of a lot of soul searching. And before we go any further, I'd like Catherine to go ahead and launch that second poll to see kind of what you guys are up to. I want to see what business stage are you at? Pre-venture, are you still just thinking about it? Is a farm something that you have a dream of doing? Startup, maybe you got a couple of years under your belt. Growth, you've got 5, 6, 7 years, and you're trying to figure out how to become a sustainable, mature business, and then mature down at the bottom. And then kind of what you're producing as well would be super useful to see. I'll give you just a minute to finish up that quick poll. It looks like we've got a lot of folks at the pre-venture stage, about half of participants so far, and a lot of folks working in specialty crops and value-added or cottage foods. Just another about 15 seconds, and we'll close that up. Perfect. There's your poll results. We've got primarily folks that are about half pre-venture, are thinking about getting started in farming, which is perfect. That's really what this presentation is going to be geared towards most primarily, is those folks at the pre-venture and startup phase. That said, folks in the growth and mature portion of it, please do stay with us and ask us questions in the discussion, especially that you feel are particularly pertinent. Looks like folks are kind of doing a lot of different things from the production side, but the majority of the folks on here today are in the specialty crops. Thank you, Catherine. You can stop sharing those poll results now. Okay, so because it's such a big conceptual question as to whether or not I should start a farm and how I should start a farm, I wanted to couch this in sort of a real life example. And the closest and nearest dearest to my heart is going to be the farm that my family started in 2014. My wife and I started this small scale poultry farm. At the height of the growing season, we're 600 chickens on 3.5 acres. It's not very big in the sort of grand scheme of things. It's still a pretty small operation. Well, too big to be small and too small to be big. It's the perfect wrong size, right? As a lot of us tend to work at. We only produce one thing. We're only producing brown free range eggs for local markets. We're not producing a whole, 7 or 10 or 200 crops or anything like a lot of you guys in the specialty crops market are. So that said, because I'm couching it in this example, all the stuff that I talk about over the course of the presentation today is still it's going to be pertinent to other types of farms, to specialty growers. We're going to run into the same issues and situations that other niche farms do. Building your brand, growing your customer base. How do I find new customers? How do I appeal to new customers? Marketing, logistics, delivery, getting stuff to the actual customer. Financing. How do you pay for all this growth that you're going to experience? Pandemic pivoting, that's something that's been sort of an undercurrent of all these discussions over the course of the last year and probably will be for a little while to come. So even though I'm not specifically using like a fruit and vegetable example or anything like that, all the stuff that we'll talk about will pertain to your farm business. Just think about the analog to what it is that you're doing. So the outline for today is very simplistic. First and foremost, we want to decide what you want your farm to do for you. And I'm thinking about financially, I'm thinking about lifestyle wise. It's an important decision and it's an important way to kind of keep the compass pointed north. How do I choose which farm enterprise? That's sort of the meat and potatoes of what we'll talk about today. But we'll talk about a lot of ways to determine whether or not you're going into the right thing. And last but not least, I'm throwing paperwork into one, great big terminology. What paperwork do I have to have in order? I'm talking about legal stuff, entities, permits, licenses, insurance, that kind of thing. Am I going to go through all the nitty gritty details of what every type of operation needs to have? No, but I'm going to give sort of the higher level things that you need to consider before you get started. And then if you want to get into some specifics during the Q&A portion, we can absolutely do that. So what do you want your farm to do for you? Why is this an important question? Because if you don't have this question answered, you might be kind of stirring in a pattern that's not getting you to your objective. So imagine that there's this continuum, and I have this continuum visualized with just this silly blue arrow here on the down amongst the apples. On one end of the continuum, you have a pursuit that's providing primarily lifestyle benefits, right? It's a little bit more leisurely. It allows for relaxation and rejuvenation and a sense of accomplishment, okay? This is often the space that like a hobby will occupy. And, it probably is going to cost you time and effort and money, but it's going to give you a sense of fulfillment. And that's what it's about. On the other end of this continuum is a pursuit that provides primarily business benefits. You're still investing a lot of time and effort and work and probably money for the chance instead to make a profit, as well as some of that sort of fulfillment, and hopefully provide a comfortable living for yourself and for your family. And hopefully, if things go according to plan, right, you'll probably have something that you can pass along to the next generation, whether that generation is related to you or somebody else is coming into the operation. Now, the next question in your mind is probably, so this is a farm. Can't this do both? Yes, I think it can. I would consider our operation kind of where this little green arrow goes on the continuum. I think that the operation that we started is partially for lifestyle purposes. We want a farm lifestyle where we get to live in the country, get to be our own boss, get our hands dirty, teach our kids a strong work ethic. Those are important things to us, right? However, there's some business reasons for doing this as well. We want to make money. We want to be able to reinvest in growing and improving the farm. Given that only one of us in our family works away from the farm, sometimes we need to have it make ends meet at the end of the month. So we do want to have some of those business benefits as well. So I think it's an important decision to be made up front. Lifestyle farms don't necessarily require all the same considerations that a business does. If you're a lifestyle farmer, you've got a nest egg in the bank, and the main thing that you want to do is get your hands in the dirt, own a tractor and a horse. Those are great things, but it's not necessarily, fully entailed what you need in order to have a business. The remainder of this presentation is really going to be focusing on farm enterprise that are at least leaning towards the business end of the continuum, kind of where my farm is, or even further to either further toward the business end. I think those are the folks that really have to have these considerations up front and up center in their mind before they start a farm. So deciding what you are going to raise, what you're going to grow, what you're going to produce on your farm is one of the most fraught considerations that a lot of people sort of in the dreaming stage have. The folks who have it the easiest are the ones that are just like 1,000% devoted to one particular enterprise. They've always wanted to do it, and they're going to make it happen, come hell or high water, whether all the other considerations that we're going to talk about are in place or not. And that's fine. Those people have a real passion. They have a real fire in their belly. They can do that pursuit, and there's nothing saying that they shouldn't. However, Others, many of the sort of entrepreneurs that I talk to sort of are just simply passionate about farming in general, not devoted to one particular enterprise. They want to take care of the land. They want to work in partnership with Mother Nature. They want to be their own boss, and those are all perfectly good motivations. And I would argue that that latter position gives you a little bit more flexibility. I think it'll benefit your farm in the long run because you're able to pivot. You're able to do a couple of different things and still be happy doing them. Um, it just makes it a little tougher to figure out exactly what you're going to get into. So, an appropriate farm enterprise decision is going to happen at the intersection of these four things. And we're going to talk about each of them in turn. Available resources, skills and experience, and passion, those are kind of rolled together in a lot of people's sort of brain, a lot of people's mental Venn diagram, and a market opportunity. What is the thing that the market is calling for? What is the problem that you need to solve? What is the demand that you're trying to supply to? That opportunity has to be there in order to have a real a business enterprise take shape, be profitable, be sustainable in the intermediate to long term. All right, resources and resource constraints. What you see on your screen here, I have a little bit lightened so you can see the text, is basically what we started farming with. It's not super impressive. We had 3.5 acres of unimproved pasture. We had some old fence rows. We had this tumble down pole shed about the size of a 2-car garage, and an egg washer that we bought from a retiring farmer that was probably built in like the 1940s. So it's got some age to it. We had about 10 grand that we borrowed from family, and we used that to renovate this old shed into a livestock facility. And we had some time. We had my wife's time. She had recently given up her town job to be a stay-at-home mom. So those were kind of the resources, the physical resources that we were working with. And those are the things that are almost always going to be top of mind. Time and money are going to be the ones that are top of mind. If you don't have a whole heck of a lot of time to devote something, that's going to limit the number of farm enterprises that you can pursue. If you want to only do this 10 or 20 hours a week, don't choose to be a dairy farmer, for example. Just one quick thing that comes to mind immediately now, working a lot in Wisconsin. And when I say working capital, I mean cash. Cash, what that whole phrase, cash is king, that seems so nebulous and trite, it really is important. Not only for the upfront investment in the infrastructure, the equipment that you're going to need to run your business, you have to remember that even after you start your farm business, you're going to have a period of time with little to no cash flow that you need to be able to weather as a producer and sometimes as an employer, in order to get to that period where your business is actually bringing money back in. So either having cash in the bank or access to working capital through some other kind of credit facility, like a revolving line of credit through a local ag bank or something like that. Some people consider credit cards access to working capital. Did we start our farm partially on credit cards? Yes, we did. Is it something that I would encourage everyone in the audience to do? No, it's not. But it is a tool, and it is something that you can kind of keep in the back of your mind as something that in an emergency will be access to capital that you might not otherwise have. So there's the time and money thing. Secondly, land, infrastructure, and equipment. All right. The kind of operation that you're going to be able to start on 5 to 10 acres is vastly different than the type of operation that you're going to be able to start on 500 to 1,000 acres, right? Yeah, duh. 500 to 1,000 acres, in all likelihood, you're going to be doing some row crops, some large scale ranging, some things like that. The real tricky part is when you have an acreage somewhere in that 20 to 40 neighborhood. Boy, that is an interesting space to be in from the agricultural standpoint. There are A certain number of enterprises that will work well on a space that size. Some enterprises that will work well together, but it's one of those situations like I mentioned before, too big to be small and too small to be big, and you have to do a lot of thinking and a lot of consideration about what you're going to be able to do on an acreage that size, whether it's trees, berries, silvopasture, agroforestry. I mean, yeah, there's options, but you got to be careful that you don't over or underwhelm yourself. So the other thing that a lot of people don't necessarily think about when they're trying to consider their resources and their resource constraints is some of the access that they have. Because it's not like a tangible thing, but it is hugely helpful to consider when you're trying to decide whether or not to start a farm. Access to markets is huge. Okay, yeah, so we had this very minimum amount of money in infrastructure, but we had easy driving access to some pretty major metropolitan areas. I'm within relatively easy driving distance of Rockford, Beloit, Janesville, Madison, bigger schlep to Chicago, but you can get there. So we have access to major metros where we can get products sold because there is demand for food with value added and niche market characteristics. That's a huge thing. If we were out in the middle of, I don't know, Wyoming or even Iowa, right? There's some other considerations as to whether or not you have easy access to marketplaces and what kind of marketplaces you have access to. Services is important to think about. All right, so continuing with the poultry example, you want to have a poultry farm, you want to sell turkeys for Thanksgiving. Think about the full life cycle of that thing. Do you have access to a feed mill that can grind a custom ration for you that's going to get those turkeys growing healthy and appropriately? Do you have access to a processor that can get those turkeys harvested, get them dead, so to speak, and turn them into from a bird format to a food format? And if so, where is it? How close is it? Is it something that you can easily drive to? Is it going to be a major logistical and marketing expense? So access to services. Packaging is a huge deal for a lot of you folks in the specialty crop side of thing. You're going to have to think about how ultimately some of those crops are going to make it into the hands of the customer, whether that's a restaurant or an end consumer or whatever. Can I get waxed eighth bushel boxes that I can put broccoli in? Do I have access to an ice machine? Can I get custom made, twist ties and zip ties for bunching? And, if so, yeah, you almost gonna always get access to those stuff. You got to have to think about where, and you got to think about what's going to happen if all of a sudden that supply gets disrupted. What's plan B? We had a situation during the pandemic where we couldn't get access to egg cartons from our traditional supplier for a good long time. I buy them a pallet at a time. It's the perfect wrong size. It's not a bale that you can get at a farm store. It's not a truckload that the company wants to sell you. You want to get a pallet of 4,000 or so egg cartons, there's only a few people that are going to sell that thing. And all of a sudden, they didn't have access to the factory that was producing them. I don't know if everybody went out with COVID or what. So we had to pivot. We had to find another supplier. We had to buy in smaller batches. We had to adjust our labeling procedures. I mean, it was something that you had to consider during the life cycle of that product. Last but not least, I want you to think about your human resource constraints. Not only did we have access to my wife's time, so I've been working in sustainable ag for a long time. My aunt works as a business coach and could help a lot of people get through startups. My cousin's a graphic designer and helped us with our labeling and branding side of things. Human capital. My dad just happens to live right over the hill with a fully functioning, cattle farm with equipment and infrastructure. Boy, that made it a heck of a lot easier when it was time to spread chicken manure, right? So think about not only the access to the things that you have on your place. You are not an island, is what I guess I'm trying to say. You're not a one-man band. Think about the people who are around you and what they can provide in order to help you grow your business. I cannot emphasize this point enough. I've worked with a number of people that have a farm dream, but they've not done it before. They think it sounds like a great idea. And all I can say is try it first. In some way, shape, or form, try it first. There's simply no substitute for firsthand experience with a farm enterprise before you make it your business. I mean, ideally, what's the perfect case scenario? You apprentice on a farm for a year that is doing a similar thing to what you want to do. You learn about varieties that grow well. You learn about weed control. You learn about row covers. You learn about marketing. You learn about how to pack CSA boxes. You learn, what people are really attracted to for that particular culinary characteristic of what it is you're growing. And that's awesome. That's the best case scenario. But you also probably, once you have that experience, you can't necessarily start in the exact same marketplace as the farm you were interning or apprenticing on, right? Because all of a sudden you have direct competition right there next door. So it's a good way to get really in-depth experience as long as you're ready to go to, a different geography in order to start up your business afterwards. I think more people are more likely to have the time and energy just to sort of test plot something. It's not a great term, but experimenting. Just try something on the small scale to see whether or not you like it, whether or not your passion can overcome some of the challenges in the daily grind that you face. Before we ever started this chicken business, we had a dozen hens in our backyard when we lived in town. So we learned about predators. We learned about feed options. We learned about chickens exhibiting their natural behaviors. They're dust bathing there in our compost bin, for example. We learned about predators. We learned about egg quality considerations. We learned about predators. We managing through severe weather, like predators. You get the point. You can see that nice red-tailed hawk sitting on top of my chicken enclosure. You learn what the lessons and challenges are by actually trying something out, even at the small scale. You're going to get some pertinent experience, you're going to get some valuable experience, but you're not going to get necessarily all the experience you need when you're scaling this thing up to a business. For example, we did not ever consider what would happen if we went away for a few days and had someone taking care of our chickens while we were gone. Little backlog going on of eggs that needed to be washed and packed in order to get to market. This is daily grind, people. Like, this is the thing that you've got to do when you have a farm. Yeah, the seasonality changes a little bit when you're raising specialty crops, when you're raising fruits and veggies. You have a little bit more seasonal ebbs and flows. With livestock, it's a much more constant grind, and you don't really take a break during the winter at all. Chores just get harder because you're dealing with frozen pipes and fuzzy animals and predators that don't have other good food sources, that kind of thing. So even that experimentation at a small scale, despite the experience that it's going to get you, that is very, very pertinent to the enterprise that you want to begin, there's always going to be some surprises when you take this farm business to scale. Most people don't get into farming because they want to be marketers, because they want to be human resources people, because they want to be accountants. They get into farming because they love farming. They want to produce, right? That's the thing that they love. However, most of the farmers that have been in the business for decades in the niche market space have told me that, yeah, they got into it because they love farming, but they had to learn to love marketing because it's now, instead of 80-20 producing and selling, it's the other way around. It's 20-80 producing and selling. They're spending the vast majority of their time on the marketing side of things. They're developing new customers, cultivating new customers, looking for new marketplaces, figuring out new products that they can produce, trying to find what they can do when a global pandemic hits and half of their customers are no longer accessible. I mean, all of this stuff becomes a very time-consuming, high-level management type of thing that has to be something that you also love and that you are also willing to spend time in order to have a business. without a business is out of business, right? That's the old quote. You've probably heard something called the marketing mix before, the 4 P's or the 5 P's or the 7 P's. Everybody has a different number of P's. But the basics are, what's your product? How much are you to charge for it? Where are you going to sell it? How are you going to make sure people know that you've got it? And so just to kind of, again, belabor this example of what we're doing here on my farm. So we had to think about our product. So we know how to grow eggs. We know how to grow brown eggs. They're free range, fine. So free range is a claim that in the egg world has a pretty wide scope of meaning. It basically just means that the critter is not caged, right? The chicken is not in a battery cage. You can be free range in a building. So we wanted to call ourselves pasture raised. But when we were talking to the state, the people that provide our license for selling eggs, you're not pasture raised. Those birds live in a coop, and that coop is stationary. They're not moving around on pasture in a chicken tractor the way that some other people do. You can't call that pasture raised. So we're like, okay, but the people that we talk to really want to see that word pasture involved in the production system. Can we call it free range on pasture? And the guy looks at us and is like, I think so. Like, I can't see a reason why you couldn't. So free range on pasture is the terminology that we have on our label. Local was important to the people that we talked to. Small family farm, all done by hand. That's part of the sentimentality of it. People have this sort of separation from the farm lifestyle. Maybe they remember the great brown eggs that they had at grandma and grandpa's place when they're growing up or whatever. And that appeal to that sentimentality and that quality that they experienced in food when they were younger, those were all things that we could do. However, you saw behind this fancy label here on this egg carton in here, organic, freest of the free range, hormone, pesticide, and antibiotic free, animal welfare approved, USDA certified, like all of those different things. And then you can make out the product label below at $6.15. I mean, that's a picture I took at, I don't know where it was, a local store around here. We didn't have all of those same claims that they do. We don't have any third-party inspections. We're not certified organic. And that was an intentional choice. Why didn't we get certified organic? Because certified organic would mean we pay exactly 2 times what we currently do in feed costs. Okay, so why not do that and just charge more for the eggs? Well, can we actually raise our prices enough in the marketplace that we serve to justify this major change in our variable costs? Our current answer in our minds is no, probably not. I don't think so. If we were approaching Chicago in the suburbs, yes, that would be access to a marketplace and a market differentiation that we would likely need. But that's currently not our target geography. So no third-party inspections, no health claims. If you make health claims, those have to be lab verified. We didn't want to say elevated omega-3s, even though that was a thing that you saw on every label for a good long time. But what we could put is that this feed ration is enriched with flax. We've got flaxseed in the ration. That's the source that omega-3s come from, right? So if somebody is actually looking for omega-3 as their characteristic, they can sort of draw their own conclusion from a health standpoint. So it's working within some of those nuances, what it is that your customer wants, what the characteristics that you can supply, and the things that you cannot supply. So where does that place you in the category as far as price is concerned? We're not organic, we're not certified 3 different things. We don't have the fanciest of packaging like they do, but we're also not the plain white eggs and styrofoam containers that come from battery cage chickens. So we're going to find a price point somewhere in between that gray area where our customers are going to be able to be interested and converted, I guess, from browsers to customers by the characteristics that we can offer. So these look like really general questions. Who are our customers and why do they buy from us? But there's so much detail you have to consider behind them. And market research is essential before you get started in a farm business enterprise. And market research isn't just something that you download from a website. You know, yes, there's third-party market research sources out there, and that's great. And you can get some of that. But you're in a place selling a thing, and your local characteristics of your local marketplace are going to matter to you as to whether or not your farm business enterprise succeeds. So what are the demographics around you? What is the ethnic mix? Where are people from? Geographic, the psychographic, what is it they believe in? What is it that they miss? What are the culinary characteristics they're looking for? Where do they buy? What are they willing to pay? Sometimes there's no way to answer these questions without doing some of this research yourself. Going out and asking people is hard and intimidating, but you almost have to do it. And it can be very informal. Facebook is great for informal polls of what people will and will not do in their local geography. Other types of social media will do the same thing. It's easier now to get a marketing opinion on things than it almost ever has been in the past. So I would encourage you to organize your thoughts around your market position, the unique value that you're providing with some kind of decision-making framework. So the next two slides are going to be pretty doggone important as far as things to have down on paper before you get rolling in a farm enterprise. This is kind of the business planning tool of the moment, right? These things kind of ebb and flow in popularity. This is the one that's popular right now. And the cool thing about it is that it's short. This is one side of one piece of paper, right? It's called the Lean Business Model Canvas. It's been developed and adapted a bazillion different times. This is kind of the iteration that we use at FFI, at the Food Finance Institute. This is going to allow you to think through your business model. On the left, you're looking at problems. What are your customers' problems, and what are the solutions you're providing to those problems? So in my situation, it's they're not getting eggs that were the color and quality and culinary characteristics that they wanted in my local marketplace. The solution is I'm providing those things. I'm providing those characteristics that they want. What are my key metrics? How do I know it's working? Am I asking people? Am I increasing sales year on year? What are the numeric portions that I'm measuring to know whether or not this is being successful? We could spend an entire 45 minutes talking about all the different things on here, but what I want you to focus on most for the purposes of your very initial explorations is the green box in the middle, your unique value proposition. What is the thing? What is the hook? What is the differentiator that is making your product desirable in a marketplace that may already have several products that are similar or related to it? Okay. In our situation, it's free range on pasture. When we entered the egg marketplace in Northern Illinois, we did have a number of other small farms that were sort of producing, but there was enough room for a number of very small people, but there was one more commercial farm. They had good brown eggs. They had good quality. They were local. They were only 20, 25 miles away, I want to say, but they were in buildings. So having that free range on pasture on a small family farm, the optics of those birds out on grass, people love livestock on grass. That became our unique value proposition. The unfair advantage, how defensible is that unique value proposition? In my mind, people for a long time were looking for the next small thing instead of the next big thing. In local foods and agriculture, they're looking for the next small thing. And we were the next small thing. Now, we've been around for a little while, so we're not the next one anymore, but people have come to expect a certain amount of product quality from us. So that unfair advantage may have changed and adapted, and we may need to be searching for a new one. And the customer segments, the marketing mix, who are the people I'm selling to, what are they willing to pay, what do they look like, where are they from? All that different stuff is What should this is a back of the envelope bar napkin type of sketch. Do it quick, do it from the gut, and then research the things that you don't have answers to. I think it's really important to have a decision making model like this in your toolbox. The second thing that I really want you to think about real hard, this is kind of back of the envelope feasibility. So you can, feasibility studies are a big thing. I want you to think about just general financial feasibility and how big does my farm need to be in order to be financially feasible according to my objectives. Okay, so again, this is a thing where people are often limited by what they've got. I want to grow vegetables. I've got 2 acres, so I'm going to grow vegetables on 2 acres. What does that translate into in terms of returns to my time and effort? All right, so I've got a 5-acre patch, 3.5 in pasture. How many birds can I produce on that? And does it do what I need it to do? Well, start with the end in mind. Start with the financial objective in mind. So our financial objective, and this is not necessarily exactly true to our farm, but it is a way to visualize how feasibility works. So if we want to make $20,000 net, that's after we cover our farm expenses with our profitability. That's what we actually have in the bank at the end of the year. That's what we use to cover our family living costs, et cetera. If we want to make 20 grand, how do we do that with an egg farm? Well, first, you got to understand what is the margin, what is the profit, what is the gravy on top when you're selling a dozen eggs. We've done our calculations, of course. The round number is about $1. You know, if we're selling wholesale and some retail, on average over the course of the year, we might be making $1 a dozen. Okay, that's going to be different for every farm. There are farms that can sell into higher margin markets, and so they can afford to produce smaller volumes. There are farms that are going to be selling into much lower margin markets. Those, large eggs for 39 cents at Aldi are a much lower margin market, and so the volume has to be drastically increased. But so we figure we can do about $1 a dozen. This is just, like I said, translate this to the farm enterprise that you're thinking of pursuing. We can do about $1 a dozen margin. That means if I want to make 20 grand in the space of a year, I've got to sell 20,000 dozens. That's a lot. But when you break it down per week, okay, 384 dozen per week. Is that feasible? Well, it depends on your marketplace. Can you sell 100 dozen at a time to some local retail stores? Can you sell in bulk to restaurants? Do you have a very well-trafficked road where people go by and stop in and look for, farm eggs on a daily basis? Can you sell 384 a week? Some people can, some people can't. There's a first, sort of dipstick for feasibility right there. So how do I get 20,000 dozens to sell? All right, that's 12 eggs times 20. I need 240,000 saleable, almost 250,000 saleable eggs to get to my goal. Sounds like a lot. What does that mean in terms of birds? So not every egg you're going to get is going to be saleable. There's going to be small, there's going to be off color, there's going to be breaks. Guess that there's 10% shrink. So you actually need another 10% on top of that, 264,000 eggs. Per day, you need 724 eggs in order to get to your dozens, right? If the birds are averaging about 80% lay over the course of the year, that means I need right around 900 chickens to reach that goal of a $20,000 a year net revenue after operating expenses. Okay, and that's not even necessarily counting the overhead stuff of, loans that we used to buy equipment and, the utility bills and some of the overhead type of things. So what I want you to do is do that bar napkin sketch, do that back of the envelope feasibility study. Start with that financial goal in mind. I want to make a full-time equivalent income off of my vegetable farm. I want to make 50 grand, okay? I'm going to raise X, Y, and Z crop, 7 to 10 different crops. This is going to be my yield. This is how much I'm going to sell. This is how much is going to get wasted. These are the prices I'm going to sell at on average. this is the amount of money that this, broccoli is going to produce for me over the course of a year. All right. And then you repeat that for your other specialty crops. Maybe you're doing maple syrup. Maybe you're doing, horse boarding. Maybe you're raising sheep and goats. Whatever it is, start with the financial goal in mind and back calculate from the financial goal how much of a scale you need on your farm enterprise in order to get there. Okay, so the lean business model, the marketing mix, what's my product, what's my unique value proposition, what's my customer, how big do I need to be, how much do I need to sell to those customers in order to make my financial goals. Those are two really, really important concepts sort of at the dreaming stage. So just some sort of general conceptual bullet pointy type of things that we're going to cover a little bit more quickly, because I'll gladly answer questions in greater detail if you'd like. But the homework side of things, keep business and personal finances separate. Treat the business like a business, treat it like its own entity, make sure it's covering its cost first. Will you be, if you're only farming, if that's your only source of revenue, can't you just mix them, the two of them together? Yeah, you can, but going out to eat or buying clothes or filling your car with gas, those aren't necessarily farm expenses. So it's much easier to keep a very detailed record of what your business finances look like and then take a draw out of your business profitability for family living and for other non-farm type of expenses. That way you know your farm is doing what you want it to do. You got to keep records. Everybody hates keeping records. Everybody hates accounting. Everybody hates, keeping track of all those different silly transactions. But the people that love those things are the ones that are able to make the best farm financial and business decisions, because they have data to work from. They know what their ratios look like. They know if they're improving year on year. You got to keep good records of revenues and expenses in order to, one, file taxes, which you want to do. You want to file once you are investing any significant amount of money or reaping any significant amount of profit from your farm, once it's more than a hobby, start filing a Schedule F. It's important, and we can talk more about that if you'd like. It is also a really good model to sort of figure, if you don't know even where to begin in terms of what revenues and expenses do I keep track of, look at the Schedule F, the 1040 Schedule F, profit and loss from farming. There's the whole second section is all expenses. Those are great categories to keep track of in order to make filing your taxes at the end of the year pretty easy, and to make business analysis easier. You want to keep records so you can create projections. What are your goals for the upcoming year? If you are ever going to grow your business beyond the bootstrapping phase, you're going to need this stuff to apply for financing. When I was working at the bank, did everybody who walked through the door have a full-fledged 3-ring binder with, a narrative and spreadsheets, something that you call a business plan? No, they did not. But they were able to articulate that plan in both words and in numbers for what their business would look like over the course of the next 1 to 3 years. And that's the only way that, especially for someone whose early career, that a conventional financial institution is going to be able to decide whether or not it's worth it to take a risk on you. Okay, so keeping good records is essential. There's a lot of different systems for doing it. Most of the farmers I talk to use some combination of a cloud-based accounting software, be it QuickBooks or Xero or FreshBooks or something else, and a personalized, customized spreadsheet that they've made themselves. So there's usually not one tool in your toolbox that's going to do everything. Everybody keeps trying to make it. Will it get there eventually? Maybe so. The other thing that I want to tell you about record keeping is whatever it is that you decide to use, it has to fit into your workflow. Some people are old school and they just want a notebook in their pocket, in their shirt pocket here, and they're going to write down the money they make, the hay bales that they produce, the cows that they sell, what they spent at Farm and Fleet that day, that kind of thing. Very simplistic, but it'll work. The sort of modern iteration of that is my wife and I use a Google Sheet, and we use it on our phones, and we update every day how many eggs we get as far as harvest from the birds, how many eggs we wash and pack, what kind of shrink we had, and that keeps us informed of where we are over the course of the year, how the ebbs and flows happen over the course of the year, how the sales ebbs and flows happen, and whether or not there's a problem that we need to address, how close it is to time to get new birds, all that kind of stuff. So basically, I want you to, we always have these things in our pockets. So if you're constantly on a smartphone, there are tools that are available to you to keep records on the fly at all times on the farm. Just don't bury it in the compost pile, right? Um, Protect your butt, protect your assets, right? Among other things, you're going to want a business entity in most situations. Do a lot of farmers just operate as a DBA, a doing business as? Yes, absolutely. Is that a perfectly reasonable way to do it? Yes. Farms get by for their entire life doing it that way. However, if you do want to have sort of a more formalized legal separation between your personal assets and your business assets, a business entity can do that for you. The most popular ones, at least in Illinois, are going to usually be an LLC or an S corp. We can talk about the differences between those, but they're both relatively cheap to maintain. What I would encourage you to do is when you're getting your operating agreement put together, run it by a lawyer or work with an attorney to get this thing set up, because the business entity, if the operating agreement doesn't say that it's doing what you want it to do, just having that LLC by itself isn't that functional. An LLC or another business entity does not protect everything that you need in terms of monetary protection and risk management. You're going to want to have an insurance agent. You're going to want to make sure that insurance agent knows every single stupid little thing that you're doing on your farm, every single place that you're marketing, anybody that requires riders for marketing at farmers markets, umbrella liability policies, blah, 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 blah. Have a insurance professional in your back pocket so that you know that the insurance products that you're paying for are providing the protections that you desire for your operation. There's easy ways to get insurance online and all that kind of stuff, but do you know whether or not they're customized and tailored to your farm operation? I would work with somebody that is used to insuring farms, and then take them on a visit to your place. Bring them out, show them what you're doing, show them what you use, and they'll point out things that are risky that they might not otherwise have thought of when they were talking to you at the desk in the office. The last thing just kind of goes without saying, stay legal, I guess, is the long and the short of that. Have your licenses, have your permits, have your labels saying all the things that you need to do. It's so much easier just to stay above board than to operate in sort of a regulatory gray area, or even outside of that gray area, and then explain why you got caught later on down the road. This is not a forgiveness rather than permission type of scenario. You're dealing with food. You're going to be producing something that people are going to put in their mouths. It's important that you're doing it on the up and up, legal, safe. Zach can talk to you about food safety till everybody's blue in the face. So just keep these things in mind. Those were just kind of the parting shots that I wanted to leave you with. We have a number of minutes left for questions, and I would really like you to sort of start throwing some of the specifics that you have around your farm enterprises, around business questions, around financing questions, around anything like that, that we can, that are going to kind of filter up to the rest of the people in the audience. So
yeah, Andy, we have a few questions in the chat. One person would like to know, can you recommend a farm finance record keeping template? Do you have any good sources for that you particularly like?
I can tell you the ones that we have used, and I can also tell you that there are seldom perfect. The vast majority of the farm record keeping softwares that are out there are designed for larger scale conventional farms. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. They have all the same like expense categories that you need and the revenue categories that you need in order to be able to file your taxes appropriately. But people occasionally find them burdensome because they're constantly having to adapt them for what it is they're actually doing on their farm. That said, I think they're the best thing out there. when you're getting into sort of the basic subscription levels um, of QuickBooks and FreshBooks and Zero and all that kind of stuff, most of those are designed for a Schedule C business, a non-farm business. And the expense categories for a Schedule C business are slightly different than the expense categories for the Schedule F business. We initially started using Wave accounting for our farm, and we were able to kind of change that schedule of expense accounts in order to match what a Schedule F has. So that one has proven to be flexible for us. It's scalable. The basic level is free, and you can also pay when you want to start to have more functionality, like being able to accept credit cards and have employees and all that kind of stuff. So that's one I've used. I'm not going to say it's the best one out there, but we've been able to adapt it to a niche market farm type of situation.
Great, thanks, Andy. We have another question asking about resources for determining market prices.
Oh, interesting. There are resources out there. You can pay for Mintel data. You can do a lot of different things, but I would encourage someone who's in the niche market space. You're usually on the vanguard, so to speak, of food trends. Like you're trying to do something new, interesting. You're oftentimes going to be limited to sort of the commercially available information that you can Google around and find. Um, the research that we did was much closer to, oops, it was much more like going to local stores and local farmers markets and local places that we were considering selling and seeing what people were moving their products at. There's different schools of thought, but I think that it's valuable um, to be one of the more expensive products that's out there because people have a perceived value in the niche marketplace. If you walk into a farmer's market and you see these eggs are selling for $2 and these eggs are selling for $5, you wonder, okay, either somebody's trying to screw me or these ones have different characteristics or in a lower value proposition than these ones because they're priced higher. Is that always the truth? No, but I think oftentimes it's worth being very calculated about how you price your product and giving the perception to your potential customer that you have a very high value proposition.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add to that pricing mix is really knowing your cost of production.
Oh my gosh,
Right,
yes.
yeah, don't
Please
forget
break
about
even.
that.
Please break even. Yeah, I know that farming is a little bit tricky in terms of what your cost of goods sold is, but make sure that you're at least covering your variable costs. For every dozen eggs that we sell, that means we're going to have, a carton, a label, X number of cents of feed, one more bird, and a trip to wherever it is we're delivering them to. So you got marketing costs, you got supplies costs, you got food costs, you got labor costs. All those things should be calculated into the arithmetic that you're using when you decide on a price point.
Great, thanks. We have a quick question here. Somebody wanted you to relist the types of accounting software you mentioned.
Okay, I mentioned Wave, I mentioned QuickBooks, I mentioned FreshBooks, and I mentioned Zero, Xero, I think is what it's called. So those are some that I am familiar with. I haven't used all of them. The sort of farm business accountant service that we are fortunate enough to have in Illinois is called FBFM, Farm Business Farm Management. They are tax accountants for hire, but will also do day-to-day type of accounting for you. So they have their own software system as well. Again, designed for larger scale conventional farms, but can be adapted for the niche market farms. I'd also encourage anybody who has familiarity with another system or suite that they really, really like, to go ahead and throw it in the chat for people to experiment with, because there's always something new popping up, and it's not always been sort of ground truth with the niche farm community.
We have a lot of questions rolling in. I don't know if we'll be able to get to them all. But Andy, how about finding an insurance agent that is familiar with small farm businesses?
So most states in the upper Midwest have an insurance provider that is in some way, shape, or form affiliated with the Farm Bureau. Say what you will about the Farm Bureau, but they are farm advocates, and the folks that are working in the insurance side are familiar with how farms work. Um, Here in my area, for example, Country Financial is the insurance provider that is affiliated with the Farm Bureau. And as a result, their agents are pretty familiar with how farms operate. They have policies that are built for farms. They even have some hybrid policies that cover farm property as well as personal property on the same policy, and might save you some money. So that's just one example in my part of Illinois. The system in Iowa is called something different. I think it's actually owned by the Farm Bureau over there. Um, the thing that I would do, and I think that this is important when you're talking with financial service providers, whether it's an insurance, a lawyer, a banker, whomever, interview them a little bit. Get their degree of familiarity with, the different types of products that you expect that you'll need. Talk to more than one, talk to two or three, shop a little bit, because the cost, the premium, the interest rate, the whatever, all those things are variable. They're not perfectly consistent from one service provider to the other. So when you're building your team of technical service providers and sort of upstream customers from your farm, interview them. Have a conversation with them. Talk in some detail about what you need and what you expect, and see if they can meet that need for you.
Great. And the last, I think we have time for sort of one more broad overview question. We have a bunch of questions rolling in about farm taxes and the difficulty of finding a tax preparer who understands small farms. I know we particularly face that here in Cook County and the collar counties, where we don't have farm tax specialists. So if you could talk a little bit about that, would be great. And I want to tell everyone in the audience that Sarah has put up a links to a farm tax series from the Land Connection. I think it's being given by Compeer Financial, so really check that out. And Andy, if you can comment a little bit on finding a farm tax specialist.
This is a hard one too. The thing that we're fortunate for as a result of the pandemic is that people are much more willing to do stuff at a distance. If you're in a downtown Chicago neighborhood and you've got an urban farm, and the only thing around you for tax preparers are like Liberty Tax and H&R Block, it's very unlikely that you're going to find someone in either of those sort of chain shops that's going to be super familiar with ag taxes. And can they fill out a Schedule F? Maybe. If you feed them the right information, they could do something at least semi-accurately, and that's great. But I've seen ones that are horrible too. I've seen really poor outcomes from even around me, from tax preparers putting together a schedule that they're unfamiliar with or don't have the software to take care of. So I would be in that situation. I'd be reaching out to FBFM, seeing what the nearest county office might be that I could get access to, and whether or not you're an appropriate customer for them. Secondly, if they're not available or not able, I would ask them who else that folks in their area have worked with, because tax preparers are going to know other tax preparers. They're going to know somebody who's potentially in, a private shop or whatever that has ag familiarity. So you do this snowball sample. Start with FBFM, ask with, who else has got it? Who else in this area is going to be good or even just appropriate for getting stuff like that done. Can you do your own farm taxes? Yeah, you can. I think you probably pay a little bit more if you're doing it through TurboTax or whatever, but you can do them. I know a number of people have done them, but chances are, if you're using somebody who's a professional that's familiar, they're going to find more write-offs for you if you want them, and paint a more accurate picture of your profit and loss through your tax return than it would if you were doing them yourself.
Great. Thank you so much, Andy. We're a little past 1, so I think we're going to wrap it up right now. It was great hearing all your insights into all the things you need to take into account before becoming a farmer or before launching a new farm enterprise, so that we don't dig ourselves into a hole and really do what we need to do with our farming enterprises. So thank you all for joining us today, and I hope Andy's presentation has given you all some new ideas that you can put in place this winter. If you have time right now, please click on the link in the chat to complete a very short evaluation for today's session. And we really do look at your feedback and use it to shape our future webinars. Also look for an email from us with a link to the archived webinar on the Illinois Local Foods YouTube channel and a link to a second chance to complete the evaluation of the webinar you just watched. And with that, please have a great day, stay warm, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, folks.
Bye, Andy.